Hi everyone, it's Chelsea from Smoldering Serpents. It's been a while. I know it's been quite some time since I made a video. I've actually been putting off making the final video in our Meet Our Snakes series because we have 3 new arrivals coming this week that all are going to fit into that last episode of Miscellaneous Colubrids. So I've been waiting because I would like them to arrive and give them some time to settle in, make sure we know they're doing okay, and then I can include them in that last video. So I've been putting that off, and in the meantime, I've been trying to put together some more videos, but some of them are taking some time to put together because they're just going to be longer and a little more information heavy, and I need a lot of different clips to stitch together to actually make it how I want them to be. So anyways, it's taking a long time, and this video was on my list to do, and I was just waiting for us to finish the last stack of cages, which we just did like a week ago. So this video is going to be a complete tour of all of our finished reptile cages. So it's going to include 2 rooms, one that is completely done, which I'm in right now. The second room is nearly done. It just needs 2 more cages to be built into the closet once we get around to that. And then it's going to include all the various stacks that are throughout our house in different rooms here and there. So everything that is complete will be included in this video, and I've already done a tour of the room that I'm in right now, as well as most of the other cages, but you know, things change, snakes move around, we've made adjustments to some of the cages, so I figured I would just give you an overall look of where everything is right now, how the entire project is coming along as a whole, and I don't know, I just thought it'd be a fun video to make. So we'll start with this room that I'm in right now. It is not so creatively called the big reptile room. It's just the bigger of the 2 rooms that are completely dedicated to snakes. So we'll start here, give you a quick look around, and then move on to the next one. Okay, so here we are in the big reptile room. This is the first room that we started this entire project in. It's now been almost exactly 2 years, just a little bit over since we first started working in this room. So these cages are no longer new. They have settled in pretty nicely, and you know, we've come a long way since making these cages. There are definitely things that I see on a regular basis that I try to ignore that I would do differently if I was building things new now. But that being said, everything came out really well. There's been no major issues at all, and this is honestly one of my favorite rooms in the house to hang out in. We have a lot of really fun snakes in here, and it's just really beautiful being completely surrounded by cages. You can see there is the 3rd wall behind me, and the only wall that does not have cages is the wall with the big window. So anyways, we'll give you a quick look around here. You know, why don't we start with this stack this time? So down here, this now houses Lyrica. She is our 2.5-year-old neotropical bird-eating snake. Now, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of snakes out. I'm filming this early in the morning. Most of our snakes come out once the lights have been on for a while, so we're not likely to actually see anyone out. But, you know, I'll splice in some pictures of each snake as I tell you who lives where, just to give you an idea. But so this is Lyrica now. She is going to stay here for good. This is her permanent enclosure. And this is partly why I wanted to do an updated tour video, because we actually have a good number of snakes who are now in their permanent enclosures. So we play musical chairs a little bit while snakes are growing up and maturing and need different amounts of space. But at this point, we have a good number of them that are where they are going to be for the rest of their lives, in theory. So Lyrica is in here. She, typically, you know, I would try to take a guess at where she might be, but the reality is she uses this whole cage. I have briefly lost her several times because she's quite a big snake at this point. She's about 500 grams and, probably getting close to 5.5 feet. She's a pretty good sized girl, but she can squish into any corner that she wants to. So some of the time she's sprawled across the branches, and she is like a lime green and orange color, so she's really hard to miss. So sometimes she's sprawled across the branches, and other times she is squished in a corner that I did not think she could actually fit in. So this is a 5x2 by 3.5 foot cage, and she makes full use of this and then some. She uses it in ways that snakes that have previously been housed in here have never. So I'm really happy about that. I was hoping she'd make good use of her jungle here, and she definitely has. So moving up, this is Pepper, our ball python. And again, I could take a guess of maybe 3 spots that he typically is. But he also tends to move around quite a bit at night, so every morning you never quite know where he's going to be. He very much likes to sit up here under that piece of cork there, and his warm hide's there, and there's also a hide back here underneath the plants that he really enjoys. And there's also a 4th spot, which is underneath this shelf back in the corner that was initially his favorite spot, but at this point I really couldn't tell you where he actually is. But this is 5x2x2. We put him in here when he was very small, pretty much right after we got him, after he finished his quarantine. So he's been in here for a good while at this point, and he's making good use of it. It's working really well. I was a little apprehensive about a wood enclosure for a higher humidity species like a ball python, but we sealed it up. We have physical barriers on top of the sealant yet, so the bottoms of our cages, the wood is sealed, but then we also add a layer of either poly sheeting, or for Pepper, we actually have a sheet of 1/2-inch foam fastened to the bottom. So it's a solid barrier that water can't get through. And so far, no issues, holding humidity well. He's got his radiant heat panel for warmth up there. He likes to sit under there occasionally, and yeah, overall I'm really happy with how he's settled into this cage. And you know, he's not a big boy. He's turning 3 this year, and he's not really big. He is a male, so obviously he's, you know, they usually are smaller than females, but this 5x2x2 size is really good for him. I don't actually think I'd want him in smaller. In theory, you know, I don't think that a 4x2x2 is necessarily too small for a ball python, but watching the way he uses this, I'm actually really happy with the space that we've given him. So he will be in here for the rest of his life in all likelihood. Hopefully, you know, a little hard to say. Ball pythons live for so long that chances are we might redo the cage at some point. But in this size of enclosure, in this type of setup, I really like him being in here. And you know, I'm just gonna go to the next one because she's actually staring at me. So here's Luthien. Hey, sweetie. So this is Luthien's cage. Now, some of these snakes just woke up from brumation, like just. And Luthien's one of them. She is going to be bred for the first time this year, so fingers crossed things go smoothly for her and we have some really pretty little calico babies. She is definitely awake though. She likes to eat as much as she physically can, and she is ready to go now that it's springtime. But this was her enclosure for all of last year, and of course she went right back in there. And I've been picking away at this enclosure for quite a while. I've added the stuff on the ceiling, which she uses frequently. She's often up in her little UFO type hammock thing on the ceiling. That was an experiment to see what I could actually do with these plastic plates that I found. And it looks a little weird, but she really likes it. So I'm kind of thinking I'm just gonna slightly adjust how it looks for future cages, but I am just gonna go with that same idea where it's not actually fastened right to the ceiling. So it's open, which is what I was wondering if a snake would use that, if there'd be enough security, but she loves it. So for more confident snakes, I think I will definitely go with a similar idea for ceiling hides. So this is a 5x2 by 2.5, and Luthien is probably getting close to 5 feet long. She's not huge, and she makes really good use of this space. From the moment I put her in here, I was really happy watching her explore everything. She loves that mess of branches right in the middle of the cage. She's a pretty heavy-bodied snake, as calico black rats tend to be. So it is a little funny seeing her climb around on those twigs, but she does it. She's pretty graceful, actually. But yeah, so this is another enclosure that I'm really happy with, another enclosure with a snake in there that will be in here permanently. This was always intended to be Luthion's forever cage. And and Luthien eats today, and I think she knows that it's time. Hey, sweetie. Anyways, so moving to the left here. So up here we have another snake in her permanent enclosure. This cage belongs to Kementari, our female Okatee corn snake. And again, she has about 3 spots where she may or may not be, and she's actually found a 4th lately on the floor, where she's been hanging out there occasionally, but usually she's either in her warm hide or on the left there's a lower shelf that she tends to be in. It's a little hard for me to hold up the phone to give a proper view here, but this is a 4x2x2. Kem is not a big corn snake. She's barely 4 feet, and she's turning 5 this year. So I'm happy with the size. She's not super active. She goes from spot to spot, but she's not moving around a whole lot. So I'm happy with this size. I'd like to give her a ceiling height up there at some point. But as for now, she seems really content. I'm happy with how she's using it. I'm happy with how she's settled in. It is warmer at the top of these stacks, which is something we've had to take into consideration. Luthien loves the heat. She will sit right under her bulb. She will get so warm that I've been concerned about her before. Not that the temperatures aren't safe, but I've just been concerned that, you know, she's just cold and can't seem to warm up. But as she settled into this cage, she's shown me pretty clearly that no, she just likes to really warm herself and then go about her business. So the upper cage, because this one is taller and bigger yet, the ambient stays about mid-70s in this one, whereas in a 4x2x2, a smaller cage, Kem does have a smaller bulb in her fixture, so the warm spot is not quite as hot, and then it doesn't heat up the ambient as much. But Kem's ambients usually in the hottest part of the day are mid to high 70s. So, you know, you do have to take that into consideration, because we do have species that do much better at cooler temperatures with the ambient in the low 70s, so that they can cool off. So we do take that into consideration when putting snakes in the upper cages on top of a stack, is we do want to make sure that they're going to be okay with the temperatures up there. So moving down, speaking of cool temperature snakes, this is currently housing Phoenix. He is our, I guess, 18-month-old Vietnamese blue beauty snake. And, you know, I should have filmed this later in the day, because he actually is out nearly every day. He'll come out and he'll drape across all these branches. But he's probably in that back corner. It's his favorite corner back there, in the leaves, in the brush. And he has no bulb in his lamp right now. It just brings the ambient temperatures too warm. And this is going to vary by snake, because I don't necessarily find that cooler temperature snakes always get antsy when the ambient goes into the mid high 70s, but some of them do. And Phoenix is one of those who, when he had a very low bulb, he actually never used it. He never went under the warmth. And we were finding that he was hiding quite a bit. So we decided to experiment. We turned off the lamp and just let the cage go through its natural day and night temperature cycle. The LED bars that are lighting these cages do give off some warmth. And of course, the house as a whole gets warmer throughout the day. So overnight, the house typically drops to about 70 to 72. And in the daytime, this cage will usually reach about 76 to 77. And that's all throughout the cage. Now, there is some gradient, obviously. If he goes, you know, underneath this shelf here, it's quite a bit cooler than if he goes in the top shelf over there. So he has a couple degrees of gradient, but nothing huge. And honestly, he's been much happier. This goes against what I typically want to do for snakes. I usually want to give them as big of a gradient as possible within a safe range. But there definitely are snakes that have taught me that as long as you're within their comfortable zone, they don't make much use of a gradient because they really do just have a pretty narrow temperature that they actually want to be in. So that's what we've discovered with Phoenix. Phoenix is probably the next one who's going to really need an upgrade. He's pretty content in here, and I will say that, you know, when I say that I like cages to be about the length of the snake, there are exceptions to that both ways. VBBs have a lot of tail, like a lot of very skinny tail. And so, you know, a 6-foot VBB is nothing like a 6-foot bull snake, for example. So Phoenix is pushing 5 feet at this point, which typically I would not want a 5-foot snake in a 4x2x2. But he's very slender, and when he comes out and he crawls around this enclosure, he doesn't actually look cramped yet, but he will shortly. So he's going to need to be upgraded. I don't know if that'll happen before we're ready to make his permanent enclosure. The VBBs are going to be going into 8x2 by 3 or 4. I can't remember what the final plan was, but 8x2 enclosures. So he's going to have plenty of room eventually, but for now this 4x2 has actually been really great for growing him out. He's gained a lot of confidence in here. The scrubby leaves and lots of passive cover has given him the opportunity to peek out at us without being fully exposed. So it's really let us work with him. He does not like being handled, and we have not pushed that in a long time because he was showing absolutely no progress. And I don't need all of my snakes to be handleable. I don't mind if they just really prefer to not be touched, as long as they're not showing stress in their enclosure and that they're just anxious all the time. As long as they're showing me that they are confident in their enclosure and they just don't want to be touched, that's fine with me. So Phoenix is one of our very few snakes who is just a display-only snake at this point. He's very personable, very fun in his enclosure, but just don't touch him. So anyways, Phoenix is in here for now. Eventually this is going to house one of our younger white-sided black rats, but for now this is Phoenix's home. And moving down here, so this is our shortest enclosure that we have, or I guess one of our shortest enclosures. We have 3 this size. This is 4x2 by 15 inches. And typically I would not have a cage this short, but the snake that's in here is Owry, our speckled king. And she uses height for sure, but she also is very content usually. There we go. She also is usually content with just kind of whatever she has. She's a pretty small snake. She's probably about 3.5 feet long. So she has plenty of space, and I've made a point here. She does climb on the branches occasionally, but she more likes just leaf litter and cork to climb under and stuff like that. So she's a species that I do find to be very terrestrial. That being said, she does still use her shelf, and I would actually like to get some kind of ceiling hide up there just to see if she would use it. But for now, she is one of our smaller and more terrestrial snakes. So, well, typically I like to use a 4x2x2 at least for adult snakes, with the exception of very small ones. But usually I like 24 inches of height. This one really hasn't been a problem. You can again see that her basking light is off. That's going to change now that we're coming out of winter and we're going to bring our temperatures back up. But again, especially with a shorter cage yet, this enclosure gets to some pretty nice toasty temperatures all on its own during the day. And she's a snake that gets extremely restless if she's too warm. So we are very careful with making sure that we don't warm her up too much. She's very happy at just ambient room temperatures. So we'll give her probably a 15-watt bulb once we're into the warmer summer months, and she's ready to move around a bit more. But anyways, last in the stack down here we have Rosalind, and unfortunately I do think she's going into shed, so we're not going to see her. But Rosalind is our Baron's Racer, And she's on the smaller end, and honestly, we've had some questions whether she's actually female or male, which we did have her sexed, and it was by a reputable breeder, but mistakes happen. And we never really intended to breed her, so we never really double checked. So she may be male, she may be female. We're going with female until proven otherwise. But she is on the smaller end for sure. She had a rough start to life, and she's probably about 4.5 feet long. Definitely no more. And she's actually one of our least active snakes. She moves from spot to spot occasionally, but now she's been in multiple cages. She's actually been in Luthion's cage as well as several other setups as she's grown up. And she really picks a spot and just likes to sit in that spot. She'll come forward to investigate us when we're at the door. She's very curious, very outgoing. But as far as moving around her enclosure, it just doesn't happen. We give her, the option to bask and warm up. She never takes it. She's just, she kind of picks her perch and just waits for food to pass by. She reminds me of a colubrid version of our Brettles pythons, who are nearly always visible. They're just not active. They just kind of pick a spot to sit and hang out, and they seem like very content snakes. While the activity level is certainly not very exciting with them, they seem like very content snakes to me. So, it's always nice to peek down here and see her very reliably in the same spot or two. Now that she's in shed, I know where she's hiding, but it's just not possible to get her on camera at this point. But anyways, so this is a 4x2 by 2.5. She was going to be in a larger cage, but honestly, once we started seeing how she used space or not, we just decided that, this is still a good amount of room for her, and we'd rather prioritize giving that space to snakes that really use it and are a lot more active. So this is where Rosalind will stay. So overall, between these two stacks, we only have one snake who isn't in their permanent spot. Phoenix is the only one who will move eventually. So it's really quite a lot of fun to be getting them in and just realizing that they can settle in for good now. Watching how they use the space, making adjustments for them specifically. This is a lot more rewarding than kind of hopping them from cage to cage so that, they have enough space to grow up while we finish other stacks and make more room available. But so we're getting there. This wall is probably our most complete wall in terms of who's in here and who's staying here. So that's been a whole lot of fun to watch that happening over time. And now, so over here we have, this cage has housed a good number of snakes. It's a beautiful cage. I love it a lot. It's a really big cage. It's approximately 6x2 by 3.5. So it's one of our biggest cages that we have at the moment. However, it also does have some restrictions. It is built into a closet, so the ventilation is lower than other enclosures. So the species that go in here need to be able to tolerate a wider humidity range because the ambient humidity needs to be lower in here, or else you're going to have issues with the lack of ventilation. So we tend to keep this cage fairly dry, but then add in multiple humid hides. So as long as we know that any individual snake is good about seeking out humid hides and using them when they need it, then they'd be fine in here. But there is that restriction that with the lower ventilation, I should say, the humidity does also need to be a little bit lower to compensate for that. So right now we have Sterling in here. He is Lyrica's mate, our 2.5-year-old neotropical bird-eating snake. And he's likely up there in that warm hide. He's been soaking up the warmth. We actually had a bit of a learning curve with him where he was not a good eater for the first year of his life. He was very frustrating. And then I switched him over to just whole birds instead of trying to get him to eat rodents. After that, he's been a phenomenal eater. And then he kind of stopped, and he happened to stop right after we moved him to what was supposed to be his permanent enclosure downstairs. Now downstairs is colder than up here by several degrees. And I've heard time and time again about these neotropical breeding snakes that they're okay at cooler temperatures. They don't need heat. That hasn't been what I've actually found though. And obviously there are other factors that could have played into his appetite loss, but we have 4 of these snakes, and all 4 of them have shown us a very clear pattern of preferring to be slightly warmer. So Starling stopped eating when we moved him downstairs. So after trying to rule out other causes, we eventually decided that we probably need to at least try keeping him in a warmer enclosure and see if that's the cause. Turns out either he just likes this cage for reasons I don't understand or I'm not seeing, or it's the heat again. So once he was in here, the very first meal I tried to feed him after he moved in here, he not only took it, but he struck it probably the most aggressively off tongs he's ever eaten. So he's going to be staying in here. I don't find that these guys are actually that picky with humidity. I've never had a bad shed from them, even when the humidity's dropped quite a bit. So he'll likely be staying in here. It's a great size for him. He's not super, super active, but it is nice to see him stretching out along the branches. He's a beautiful slate blue and almost blood orange. So he's really stunning in this forest of an enclosure. So anyways, that brings us down here. Oops. So this is Nova's enclosure, and she's our younger female black milk. These enclosures admittedly have taken a bit of a back seat to our other ones because black milks, they really don't need too much. They are probably our most terrestrial, nearly fossorial species. They really burrow down quite a bit despite giving them options. Nova is the most adventurous out of ours, and that might just be her age and the fact that she's still smaller and lighter. But she will use the shelf to the right. There's a nice piece of cork bark there. She will sit under there. It's not exactly rare for me to find her there, so it's nice to see her using that. Typically, she's to the left there. There's a piece of cork. You can see there's a little hiding spot under there. She's typically under there. Now, again, with these lower ventilation enclosures, you have to be careful with the humidity, especially with wooden enclosures. So we give them humid hides because black milks, they do like moderate humidity. However, they are also very, very good at seeking out humid spots when they need it. So she has a humid hide. You can see the blue lid there, but it's tucked underneath a piece of cork and then buried. And she spent her whole last shed cycle in there, had a beautiful shed. So these enclosures here are about 6 by 2 by 18 inches. And that's a pretty good size for an adult black milk. You know, if I could get 2 feet of height, I don't even know if I necessarily would do it. They just really don't use it. I find that when you take them out, they'll climb. They certainly can climb, that's for sure. But, you know, of all the snake species that I will say, they'll use the height if you give it to them. These ones are probably the least likely to actually use the height. And I've tried giving them different options. They have, you can see huge, big flat shelves with hiding spots on top of them, and they just don't have much interest in leaving the ground, but obviously they have the option. And here, this cage belongs to Skotos. He's our adult male. He actually has a different light in his, which is why it's not quite as nicely lit. He gets extremely restless during breeding season and if it gets too warm. So we have swapped out his LED bar from a 4-foot bar to a 2-foot bar in an effort to bring the temperatures down even lower, and it works pretty well. He doesn't really do, you know, he'll nose rub occasionally. I can actually show you right along the front edge here. You'll see there's actually a piece of foam here because there was a lip that he would nose rub on, and he never really did anything serious, but I didn't want it to get serious. So I put some foam there so that even if he pushes on it, he can't do anything to himself. It is the unfortunate reality of having adult males who really get into breeding season. He's also housed, sandwiched in between 2 females. So I don't know how much he's picking up on that. All I can tell you is when it is actually breeding season, when I open his enclosure and I open Nyx's enclosure, he will go directly from his enclosure right into hers. So I do feel like he is aware that she's there, and it's probably making him a little more anxious yet than he would normally be. But, you know, it's unfortunate. It sucks to see them so restless, but it does pass within a few weeks. So otherwise, we just try to keep his temperatures a little more cool. Again, these snakes can be individuals, right? There are some that don't mind the heat. Nova or Nyx have never minded a little bit of extra warmth. Scotus does not tolerate it at all. He needs his temperatures to be below about 78 all across the board. So that's just something we've learned about him, and we've adjusted for his specific preferences. Now down here we have Nyx's enclosure, and it's a little bare, it's a little bit lacking, but at least it has the room that she needs. She is to the left under that piece of cork. That's her favorite spot. Now her enclosure is a little bit more open just because we need to be able to fit a pretty big nesting box in here every year. Basically, we pull that piece of cork that's to the left, we pull it out into the center of the cage, and we stick a large, approximately 15 quart tub back where the cork is right now, and that's her lay box. And she's used that without issue. So, you know, I always say we treat all our snakes no differently, whether they're breeders or not. And it's true, except there are considerations with the females, especially with cage designers. We have to be able to fit a lay box in. We also need to make sure there's nowhere that she could wedge herself and lay her eggs where we'd have difficulty getting those eggs out. So that is really the one consideration. I see a little tiny face sticking out. And there's the sweet girl. They're just starting to wake up. There's really no interest between them yet at this point. So hopefully once it warms up a little bit and we're starting to feed her especially more heavily, hopefully they'll pick up some interest in each other. You know, typically I wouldn't think that I would actually love a fossorial or terrestrial species, but when I don't have too many of them, it really is pretty endearing seeing their little faces poke out of the bedding. They're very outgoing. Black milks are incredibly outgoing, and they may not be draped across the branches with any frequency, but they make up for it. They are digging tunnels all day long. They're sticking their little faces out to investigate. They're a lot of fun. They're very interactive. And I'm gonna zoom back out, and just briefly, here is one of our temporary enclosures. This houses Bug. She's our 18-month-old white-sided black rat. And this is a temporary grow-out enclosure. She's actually going to be going where Phoenix was. But for now, this is where she is. This is how we usually like to set up young colubrids to grow out. These are great enclosures, very secure, very easy to cut out the top and use a lamp for heat. Yeah, I'm going to zip right over here because I see somebody's out. So here we have Demi. She is our adult variable king snake. And she's looking like she's thinking she's hungry, which is nothing new. But anyways, I just thought, since I see one snake out, I might as well show you quickly. So here's the other side of the room. Now these were our very first cages that we did. So you can see the gaps around the doors are quite a bit bigger, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It is added ventilation. And we just did things a little bit differently. So the top one currently is empty. That one is going to house Fea, one of our adult female Baird's rat snakes. She is in a temporary setup right now. I need to redo this cage a little bit, and then she'll be moved in there. And then, of course, we have Demi. And Demi is supposedly a very terrestrial species. However, I catch her up on her shelves and her branches an awful lot. So she either is an exception, or people calling them terrestrial is overblown a little bit, because she is quite often up here. She'll rest up there. I'll catch her traversing along here. She's all over the place. So this is one of our very small enclosures. One of our, well, it is our smallest in terms of footprint. This is a 3x2x2. Now Demi is just barely 3 feet long, so it actually meets the sizes that I typically like to put snakes in. It's a good minimum size, I think, for even smaller snakes yet, because it allows you to have a nice temperature gradient and set up multiple hides, gives you room for humid hides. Any smaller than this, and I think I would have trouble properly setting it up, regardless of the size of snake. So this is really the minimum floor space that I like to work with. This is actually the very first cage that I made, so it is a little rough around the edges in some places, but Demi sure likes it. And then moving down here, this is one of our snakes that just woke up. This is Elithar, our male hypo Baird's rat snakes. And this is a 4x2x2. It's a great size for most Bairds. All three of our Bairds are right around 4 feet. Faye is a little bit larger, but Elithar is right at 4 feet. And he is right in there. You can see that big ugly glob of hot glue holding that branch in place. That's something that I don't really do a whole lot at this point, but I did do it initially in this first stack of cages just as a way to kind of make sure branches were secure. There are much more subtle ways to do it than that, but you know what? It is what it is. I actually really like this enclosure. Elithar seems to like it. He's been in here all of last year and now this year, and he'll stay here forever. This is his enclosure. He likes to bask under the lamp occasionally, but he's largely a room temperature snake as well. He prefers to just sit on the cool side and warm up, only really when he's in shed or digesting a particularly big meal. And moving down here, so if you watched the last tour, you will probably remember that this 3x2x2 housed our male northern water snake, Calcifer. Unfortunately, we lost Calcifer right around Thanksgiving. We don't know why, so it took a good while for us to clean out this enclosure and sanitize everything. We've had Calcifer for many, many years. We knew it was nothing contagious or anything like that, so we just cleaned it out, let it sit for a while, and it's been back in use now for a couple weeks. We have a very special little guy who's using it. You can see he's back there. Whoop. There we go. So this cage is currently being used by Aldemir, about 18-month-old corn snake. And we'll have to see. He's pretty small for his age, as you can see by that little tiny face. He's pretty small for his age. He eats well, grows steadily, but I don't really expect he's going to be huge. If he is, we'll move him. If not, he may stay here for life. It'll really depend. We have a couple other smaller rat snakes where if he gets past their size, we'll swap them out and put the smaller ones in here. But there is a chance he'll be staying here. So far right now, he's just a little guy. He's like 120 grams or so. And so he has a ton of space for now, at the very least. And we just moved him in here. He was actually in a setup similar to Bug's temporary tub that I just showed you before. And he's always been very active. He's found multiple hiding spots that he loves already. And yeah, so this is either going to be a grow out or his permanent enclosure. Can't really say at this point, but for now he'll at least be here for probably another year or two until we decide where we want him permanently. Moving over here, this is Hohenheim's enclosure, and this is our male extreme hypo hunter and milk snake. So this is a 5x2x2. He is tucked in the back left underneath the shelf. I know because he's been there for a very long time. He's actually, I think, trying to cool himself a little bit. We're not breeding hunter and milk snakes this year, so we didn't cool them, and he seems to have taken issue with that. So he's eating just fine, but he's definitely trying to keep himself cold. which he's getting down into the probably upper 60s at night, being on the floor there. And this cage is actually in an outside corner of the house, so he's definitely getting chillier down there than other snakes, which he seems to enjoy. But, you know, this cage really is going to need some work at some point. Hunter and milk snakes, again, are very terrestrial. He will climb over branches, but he does not want to be up off the ground with any frequency. So I am going to redo this cage at some point. But it's not taking priority over getting new cages built at this point. He seems very content in here. It's nice seeing him sprawl out. He's about 5.5 feet long, and he's like blindingly orange. Blinding orange and silver, so you can't miss him. So seeing him sprawl out in nice big cages like this is a lot of fun. Yeah, hopefully he will come back out in the spring once he decides it's time to go. But fortunately, he's going to be a little bit disappointed because his girlfriend's not waiting for him. So he gets a year off. Okay, so here is a new recruit in this cage and also in general. I don't think I'm going to be able to catch him on camera. I do know where he is, but it's just, I know it's not going to focus. So he's up here. He's in the branches in the plant up here. So this cage now belongs to Sumac. He's our 4.5-year-old Gulf hammock rat snake. And we have 4 of them, and he's the older male. And he's settling in quite well. He's a pretty shy boy. We knew that even throughout his quarantine period. We could tell that he was pretty shy. So I was a little unsure how he would do in this cage because, as you can see, it's a little more open than other cages. I've tried putting some more fluffy plants around. There's cork bark on the ground covered by leaf litter. So I was a little bit unsure of how he'd do. Thankfully, he seems to have settled in quite well. While he's not exactly sprawling across branches and such, he is actually usually peeking out of the leaves, and he has been eating just fine. So I'm happy with that. He may stay here. I'm not quite sure. He's on the smaller side. He's one of them that if Aldemir happens to pass him eventually, he might go in that smaller enclosure. Sumac is quite inactive. He's also pretty small for a rat snake. He's barely 4 feet and very, very slender. So we'll see. He may stay here, he may not, I'm not sure. But for now, he seems to be enjoying the extra space. Finally getting out of quarantine is always a relief. Now up here is one of our less pretty enclosures at the moment, and that is because it's basically just serving a function at this point, which is to get this lovely lady to make sure that she has enough room until we build her actual enclosure. So this is Tempest. She's our 18-month-old false water cobra. And she grew at an astonishing rate. I always thought people exaggerated, and I know now that they're not. False water cobras grow really quickly. So this is a 5x2x2 enclosure, and eventually this is going to house probably Skotos, our male black milk, because I would like to get him out of the closet and to a larger enclosure, which has a little more airflow and also will stay a little bit cooler because it's not so enclosed. So Skotos may go in here. I have made adjustments from when it used to house one of our Japanese rat snakes. I've just put these big horizontal branches so that a heavy-bodied snake can traverse them more easily. This very not pretty box sitting here is Tempest humid hide, which is what we use for lay boxes for larger snakes, as well as humid hides just generally. And then she's got her big water bowl so that she can go in there if she wants. She rarely does, but she still has the option. And then her basking shelf, which until only days ago used to have a nice piece of cork on there that I thought she might like to sit underneath. But instead she decided that she was just going to make a habit of tossing it off the shelf, sometimes into her water dish, sometimes just in weird angles. So I decided to take away the cork and give it to someone who would appreciate it. And since then, I've actually caught her sitting on her basking shelf a couple times. So I guess she was telling me she did not want cork on her shelf. She just wanted a nice big shelf. So she's going to be in here until we get around to her 14-foot adult enclosure. It's the next priority. Of course, it's going to be a huge project because it's not just a 14-foot cage for her. It's an entire wall that involves 4 7-foot enclosures plus her 14-foot enclosure. So it's a huge, huge project. So we'll get started, but it is going to be some time before she can move in. She's approaching 5 feet at this point, so she's going to need an upgrade, and I will probably feel the pressure, but I also don't want to move her up to another enclosure until it can finally be her permanent enclosure. I don't want to move her all over the place. And she's quite content in here. She's gotten a little less crazy and restless as she's gotten a little bit older. She also seems to really like this size of enclosure. She used to be in the one right below, and then that was just getting too ridiculously small for her. But even just an extra foot of length in the cage has really calmed her down, and she seems to appreciate the open space a little bit more. And then above her, we have, I also really like how this enclosure came out with the branches. This one has housed various snakes, but it currently houses Ilara. She's one of our 18-month-old white-sided black rats. And she's pretty shy. She always has been. I've known that she would be a little bit more reclusive in an enclosure. She just has that personality. But we catch her out probably every couple of days. We'll catch her sprawled across the branches, just casually climbing around. So she's settling in. It hasn't been that long. I always give snakes a good couple months before I really judge their behavior in an enclosure. So she's only been in here for a couple weeks now, I think. So she's got some time. She's also pretty young. She's not that big, and this is a 4x2x2 enclosure. So it'll take some time for her to grow into it and for her to gain some confidence. But so far she's doing really well in there. Okay, so that is our first room done. This is the room with the most cages, so the rest of it's not going to be quite as long for each individual space or room. But this is, like I said, our very first room that we completed. It has the most snakes in here that are in their permanent enclosures. So this is one of my favorite spots in the house to hang out. So we're going to move on to the second room, which is not 100% complete, but has the most recent stack of cages that we just finished. And then we'll go from there. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the small reptile room. It's a little more echoey in here. I hope it won't affect the audio too badly. But anyways, this room has a similar layout, or at least it will. We have one wall of cages there. We have one wall of cages here. And then we'll eventually have 2 enclosures going into that closet. We do have a bonus dog in here because this is her favorite spot to sleep. So if you hear any scratching noises or weird grunting, it's not me. It would be Jetta. So this is the first wall that we completed in here. And we still need to get the light guards on. You can see the bulbs are shining right in our eyes. And that's one thing that I like to do is I make my own guards that just, they go into the light guard itself and it just shields the light, points it downward a little bit more and just directs it a little more onto the warm spot. So I still need to do that. Otherwise, these cages here are really done. I would like to add ceiling heights to a couple of them, but they are largely done. So up here, I don't see him, surprisingly. Of course, as soon as I try to make a video, we don't have anyone out. This is housing Jinx, our 3.5-year-old male Japanese rat snake. And he is typically up at the top on one of the shelves there. You can see in the reflection of his cage, we have someone behind me who is definitely out and about, but we'll get to her. So this is Jinx's enclosure. It's 4x2 by 2.5. And he's made good use of that. He does not mind heat, despite being typically a more cool temperature species. He does not mind heat. He never has. Even as a little baby, he's always sought out the warmth. So his ambient stays about the mid-70s in this enclosure, and that's just a 15-watt bulb. So it gives a warm spot of the upper 70s right below it. So just a little bit of a gradient. Now down here, I would say good luck finding her, especially getting her on camera. But in this enclosure, we are currently housing Buttercup, and she is our yearling Taiwan beauty snake. And eventually this is going to house one of our female Honduran milk snakes. But for now, it's actually a really good grow out size for Buttercup. These are the other two 15-inch tall cages. Like I said, I typically like to go 24 inches tall. However, for a grow out, for a very small snake, it's completely fine. And also for Hondurans, this height is completely fine. You can see I have gone all out with the bushes in here. I'm trying to make sure that she's nice and secure. She was definitely a shy baby, and she's come out of her shell wonderfully in here. She, well, she's not out now, and she typically doesn't just sprawl out across the branches. She's climbing around quite often throughout the day. It's a bit of an odd day that we don't see Buttercup, so she's getting a lot better as she grows, and she just has the right environment to gain confidence. And then down here we have Rozzy, and Rozzy is our approximately 18-month-old Honduran milk snake. He's a holdback that we bred. He is a baby from Cinny and Hohenheim's second clutch. And he is, I couldn't really even guess where he is. He has probably 4 or 5 spots that he likes to be. And he's actually interesting, and it might just be because he's younger, although I haven't had other young Hondurans do this. He actually likes to spend a lot of time up off the ground. So we find him up on the shelves. It's not rare, it's not exactly a common occurrence, but we do find him up off the ground probably once every week or so. Not just climbing, he'll be sitting up there. So it's really interesting seeing how he uses the space. He'll probably stay here for life. Depends how big he gets. But if he does stay here for life, I'm interested to see how his behavior changes as he grows and gets bigger. And then, oh, here we have somebody out. So this cage is currently housing Kovaki, and he is our almost 2-year-old male Russian rat snake. Now, you can see how beautiful he is. So, he will likely stay here for his whole life, depending how big he gets. He is big for his age. So, this is a 4x2 by 2.5. It's definitely not on the large side for a Russian rat snake. So we might swap him around if he ends up being exceptionally large. Russian rats I don't actually find are super active. They're very, very confident. They're usually out, but they don't actually move that frequently. So we'll see how he uses the cage. He hasn't been in here for too long. I'll see how big he gets. We'll just evaluate. But for now, he'll be in here for probably the next year or two for sure, at the very least. And he has settled in really well. And yeah, I cannot get over how beautiful he is. He is stunning. So moving on. This enclosure, oh, I see her. This enclosure is housing Saffron. She is our adult female Gulf hammock. And I'm gonna lean in before she leaves. There she is. She's a very beautiful girl. She's very outgoing. Like, I'm shocked how often she is out and about. She just moved in here probably about 2 weeks ago, and she is out and about an awful lot. That string that's going up and down here was actually meant to be a bit of decoration. This shelf is coming quite far to the front, as you can see. So I was initially intending it to be a support. Ended up not needing the support, but it would, I think, look a little bit cool to have a nice rope going top to bottom and possibly tie in some vines to it. We'll have to see. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with it, but for now I have a placeholder string attached to some hooks. Excuse me, you're being a little bit loud. Excuse me. Okay, well, anyways. Okay, next up, this is one of my favorite boys. This cage belongs to Eno, and Eno is another one of our 18-month-old white-sided black rats. We have 4 of them, all the same age, so I say 18-month-old white-sided black rats an awful lot. So he's typically off to the left. I do kind of think he might be going into shed. He's been a little reclusive lately. Typically he is sitting right out here. So I do have a feeling he's probably going into shed. But anyways, this is his enclosure. I think it came out really well. It's a 2 by 4 by 2.5 foot tall enclosure. So again, we'll see if he stays in here permanently. Depends how big he gets. He is huge for his age, so he very well might get an upgrade at some point. But for now, he is loving it. He's doing really, really well in here. And then up here we have our female Japanese rat snake, Jazz. It is rare for her to not be out, so I do wonder if she's going into shed. But she's not out at the moment. So that's another 4 by 2 by 2.5. She will eventually get swapped with Jinx because this enclosure on the right has far too many nooks and crannies where she could, in theory, lay eggs, and then we would have a hard time getting them out. So like I said, there's that consideration with breeding females. So she's going to spend this whole season in this enclosure, and then we're going to brewmate them next winter, and when they wake up, her and Jinx will probably be swapped. Jinx might go down to the bottom there, and we might put Kavaki in the top. I don't know. But between these enclosures, there's going to be some swapping around because Jazz definitely can't be in here while she's potentially laying eggs. So turning around, we have the attention hog right in the middle there, but we are going to start at the top. So these are the newest cages we just finished. You probably will see some fingerprints and dog hair on the doors because it takes a while for them to de-static. So they haven't quite gotten there yet. This top enclosure belongs to Baron. He's our male calico black rat, and he is hopefully going to be a first-time dad this year. He is, of course, just woken up from brumation, so he needs time to settle in and wake up. He's been cruising around a little bit, but honestly, he's just not quite there. He needs a couple more meals and a little bit more time to really become alive again. And down here, we have one of our newest additions. This is Tundra. And Tundra is an approximately 4 to 5 year old female white-sided black rat snake. And she is the single most confident snake we own. I could open this door and I could stick my fingers in right towards her, and she would A, not go after my fingers with a food response, and B, not pull back in fear or defensiveness. She just does not care. She's out every single day, and she is making full use of this enclosure. This is her forever home. She's just over 5.5 feet long. And these cages are all 5 by 2 by 2. So I found this to be a pretty good size, and she seems to think so. She's certainly not restless in there. She doesn't look cramped. Has plenty of hiding options. We've used some different kinds of plants in these enclosures. They're not my favorite. They're very bright green and much more fake looking than the other plants that we've used. Again, I've said this in other videos and I'll say it again. A lot of people assume that our enclosures are bioactive. None of them are bioactive. We don't have one single live plant in any enclosure, and we don't have any cleanup crews on purpose. I'll say on purpose because we have a lot of springtails, in enclosures accidentally. They come in the soil, they come in the leaf litter. So there's definitely some little critters that are taking care of some of the waste on a very small scale, but none of our enclosures are bioactive. So these are all silk plants. So these ones are the new ones that I got for cheaper, which it shows, but they do the job. She definitely likes rustling through those plants. And down here is her boyfriend, who we're not going to see because he is deep in shed. And he is underneath this big basking shelf. He has a hide under there, and he is hanging out down there. So this is Caspian, and he's just over 6 feet. He's huge. He's not nearly as active or confident as Tundra, but I am excited to see. He's been in shed the entire time. He's been in this cage, so I have not got the opportunity to see him actually moving around in here yet. So I'm very excited once he sheds and he kind of wakes back up. I'm excited to see how he uses the enclosure. And then down here we have Jetta. Hi, Jetta. So down here we have Annapelle, our adult female Russian rat snake. Now, this was a bit of a surprise that we ended up putting her here because typically I would not put a Russian rat snake in a 2-foot high enclosure. However, Annapelle has been in multiple enclosures, 2 separate 3.5-foot tall enclosures, in fact, and she does not use the height. So, you know, snakes are individuals. Obviously, Kovaki was up on his branch, but I have found that Annapelle in particular just does not need or want the height. Even with all the opportunities in the world to use height in different ways, she just does not use it. So we ended up putting her here because I wanted to give her more floor space rather than more height. And again, she's just waking up. She's under here. You can see her side. Oh, wow. That's a very, very dirty door. Okay, she's under there. This door is probably the worst. It needs a good wipe down, but anyways. Oh, I see her face. Let's see if we can get this to work. No, not at all. Okay, well, her face is under there watching me. So anyways, so this is potentially going to be her forever home. We don't know. We're going to try her out in here. We have her on the floor because she is really not bothered by the dogs walking in and out of here, by us walking past her door. You have to put confident snakes at floor level because there's a lot of movement with your legs walking by, with our dogs walking by. We need confident snakes down here. So Annapelle is a good choice for that. Also, it's obviously much cooler on the very bottom of a stack. And being a Russian rat snake, she does appreciate cooler temperatures. So yeah, we'll see how she does. This is a nice enclosure because I do have a good spot over here on this shelf to put a nice sized lay box for her. I can also slip a 6-quart underneath between those shelves on the floor level. So there are options for giving her a nice spot to lay. So we'll see how she does. There's a lot of trial and error, and especially with these very confident snakes, there's not a whole lot of pressure to keep them in any given enclosure. They can move if they need to. I don't know if Tundra can move if she needs to. I think she's still in the exact same position. Anyways, so yeah, so this is how this room is turning out so far. I'm very, very happy with it. It is smaller than our other room, but it feels nice and cozy. It doesn't feel cramped. This closet is eventually going to have 2 enclosures in there, 2 taller enclosures. That is going to be for our younger pair of neotropical bird-eating snakes. And we've made adjustments to that plan. We initially were not going to put them in there, but when we discovered how Sterling did in the cooler temperatures, we decided we didn't want to put our younger pair downstairs and potentially have to go through all that again. So we were just going to keep them up here where it's a little bit warmer. The closet keeps the temperatures much more stable. So we've decided to put them there. Other than that, we have my light box where I take some of my photos. What was that? And yeah, that's where this room stands at this moment. The closet cages are not a priority. That is going to be one of our last projects. Like I said, we need to do that entire huge stack downstairs. And then after that, we're gonna need to see whether we need to do the VBB's cages, or there is one more large stack to house our bull snakes, as well as our 2 new additions that are coming this week, which I'm not going to say until we get them and they settle in. But there is another large 7-foot stack that needs to be built as well. So anyways, we're going to move on to the next stack. We have no more full rooms of snakes, just stacks that are throughout the house. So we'll just go stack by stack now. Okay, so this stack is in our living room, so I'm not going to give a full overview of it because I'd have to change to such a wide view that I'd basically be showing everyone our entire living room. So we'll just go cage by cage here. This is a 4 by 2 foot stack, and there's 4 cages high, so they're each 2 feet tall. This is actually my least favorite stack. And it's partially because of the white background, which I wanted to test it out and see how I liked it, and the answer is I don't. But it also, I think I skimped on the shelf size and the branches, which I can fix the branches, no problem. But I feel like these cages are a little bit lacking, and I will come back to them and I will fix them. For now, we have a bunch of very laid back snakes in here that don't really seem to mind. Here we have our adult male Russian rat snake, Kirill. He's just waking up from brumation. He's pretty lively already. He'll get into breeding mode very shortly, I'm sure. So Kirill is in the bottom here. Again, another Russian rat snake at the bottom of the stack. Our youngest female, Tanara, is still in her growed enclosure, but all 3 of the Russian rats that we have in enclosures are at the bottoms of a stack. And it's because of the temperature, and it's also because they just don't care about the movement going by their enclosures. They're very confident, very sure of themselves. So Kirill is in here, and one up we have Nira. And Nira is our adult yellow rat. She's very entertaining. She loves to stare at us. She's very, very nosy. Nosy Nira is what we call her. And she's done really, really well in this enclosure. I actually do like how this one turned out. She's done really, really well in here. And she uses all of it. She likes to tunnel. She likes to climb on the branches. She sits on different shelves. She uses the basking spot frequently. She's done really, really well. I'm very happy with her here. She'll stay here forever. This is where she'll be. She is definitely an adult. We don't quite know her age, but she's probably turning 6 this year, and she's right at 4 feet long, so it's a great size for her. Great layout. She seems to do well with the cooler temperatures down here. Overall, everything just really has gone smoothly when we put her in this enclosure. She literally just ate yesterday, but she thinks she's still hungry. And here we have one of our female Baird's rat snakes, Nuwata. Nuwata is very secretive. She always is when she comes up from brumation. She's probably back, hiding back there. She takes a while to wake up. Usually she's very confident, and we see her quite a bit. She likes to rest her head on branches and watch us, and she's usually quite outgoing, but it takes a while for these snakes who are brumated to really come back fully, so I expect to see more of her in the next few weeks. We will be breeding her again to Elithar. It's going to be a bit of a test clutch because their last year's clutch did not go so great. We had 2 out of 4 come out pretty severely kinked. And we incubated at a lower temperature, so I really don't think it was temperature related, which then means that it's likely genetic, or it was just a fluke. So that's what we're testing for this year, is we're testing to see if they actually can give us a nice healthy clutch, if it was just bad luck last year. They have beautiful babies. The babies who came out okay are big, robust, gorgeous babies, but 2 out of 6 needing to be culled was just not a good ratio. So we'll see how she does this year. Last year was her first clutch, which can always bring some weird issues. So we'll see how she does again this year. we'll move Elithar into this cage for breeding them. We did that last year and they actually did really well. So this will be both of their home for a little while anyways, while they get the job done, hopefully. Now up here we have a grout enclosure. Well, it was initially going to be a grout enclosure, but seeing how well he's done in here, I do actually feel like he'll stay here for life. This currently houses Shiloh, our fourth 18-month-old white-sided black rat snake. And Shiloh has done exceptionally well in this cage. He is always out watching us. It is almost distracting how often I want to look up and see where Shiloh is and see if he's watching us or climbing all over the place. This is one that I most definitely will be adding ceiling hides to, probably some vines and ropes for him to climb on. He's very interactive with his enclosures, but he will probably stay here for life. He is a small boy for his age. I don't expect him to ever outgrow this 4x2x2. So yeah, that's probably, we'll have Shiloh in here permanently. We'll likely have Nuada in here permanently. Nira's here permanently, and Corilla will eventually be sold when Kovaki's old enough to take over the breeding duties. But for now, Krill's staying there. No one has taken his spot. So yeah, these guys are here to stay at least for this year, if not beyond, and they're actually a really great group to have in our living area. They're very interactive, very curious and confident, very entertaining snakes to have right in our living space. Okay, last but not least, we have our stack of 5x2x3 enclosures. There's 3 of them, and I'm gonna go up here first because I see her face and she probably will withdraw at some point. Right at the top there, you can see Kalika. She's our 2.5-year-old female VBB, and she just refuses to believe that the ground is a thing. She just doesn't want to acknowledge that she actually could touch the ground if she wants to. So she is just up off the ground on the branches. She's on the shelves. She is a very arboreal snake. That's her favorite spot right there for sure. That's usually where she is. Sometimes she's in her warm hide. She actually traverses around the cage quite a bit, but she never sits on the ground. I never catch her actually resting on the ground anymore. She just loves her elevated spot right up there. And of course, it's the top cage in the stack. So where she's sitting, she's actually about 8.5 feet off the ground. So I'm looking way, way up at her. And we've actually found that helps a ton with really shy and nervous snakes. She's come out of her shell quite a bit. She used to be quite shy, to the point where we just couldn't really be in the same room as her without her darting back immediately. And that's definitely changed since she's been moved down here. She's gained a lot more confidence. She's become more sure of herself. And that's nothing new. That's just what we found when you let snakes be so high above eye level, they really do become much more sure of themselves and much more secure. So she is up there. She'll be there until her permanent enclosure is made. And then right below her, we have Taser. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it on camera. He's up back there under the cork. But anyways, so Taser has been here for just as long as Kalika. Taser's extremely confident. He's never had issues with being shy or nervous. So he's done really, really well in this enclosure. He uses basically every corner, top to bottom. He has a humid hide in the bottom left that's buried underneath that plant and kind of dug into the substrate. He likes that occasionally. He'll use his warm hide when he's in shed or digesting. His favorite spot currently is the top left there, but that changes from time to time. So he's done really, really well in here. I really love how this cage came out, but I do feel like I want to add some more bigger branches at some point. We'll see how it goes. He's not too big on actually climbing branches. He prefers to be on the flat shelves. So it may be a waste of time for me to try to add more to it, but I do really like that little tree in the middle there. I don't typically have a lot of branches that are not just horizontal, because that is the most useful for the snakes, is when they're horizontal, but I thought that branch was just too cool to chop up. And I do really like how it turned out. So moving down, we have a snake who drives me crazy a little bit. So this is Humboldt, our eastern fox snake. He's an extremely restless snake. I've talked to people who keep them in various conditions, and the consensus seems to be that they're just very active snakes. So he used to be upstairs in the little reptile room in the cage that Saffron is currently in. And we found that he just needs more space. And again, this is a good example of why my general rule of a cage that is about the length of the snake doesn't always apply. Like I said, the VBBs don't necessarily need a cage that's the length of them because they're just not very big or active snakes for their immense length. But here we have the opposite, where Humboldt is barely 4 feet long. But when he was in a 4-foot enclosure, he just seemed cramped because of his activity level. He just seemed like he needed more room. So he's now in this 5x2x3. I think he looks really good in here. Even when he gets, really active and he's really pacing around, he still doesn't look cramped in here. So I feel like this is going to be good for him. Another bonus is he does like cooler temperatures. And not only is he downstairs, but he's at the bottom of a stack. So he's getting about as cool of temperature as we can offer in our house. And he does seem to be doing much better in here in terms of holding his weight better and not being quite as crazy. Although, I don't think he'll ever just not be crazy. He's made me a little uneasy before because I don't like to see my snakes moving this much. It sounds weird to say, but the way that he moves made me initially feel like there was something wrong, like he didn't like his environment, he was trying to get out. It just made me feel like I was doing something wrong, but I've since come to learn that this is just very normal behavior for him, regardless of the size of cage he's in, regardless of temperatures. I mean, he's definitely less crazy now that he's cooler, but you can see he's still all over the place. He actually reminds me of how some of my males get in breeding season, except he's like this all the time. So, it's just something I've come to learn, that this is just the behavior of him. He does take breaks, he does calm down. Actually, early in the morning, he'll often come out and just sit directly under the light to bask, which is really cute. But I think this size of cage will be good. He can get his energy out better. He has more levels to traverse, cooler temperatures to keep him a little calmer. So far, it's worked out really well for him, and he'll probably stay here forever. But yeah, that is the last stack, and this is the last cage. And dude, we only use very low bulbs, so I'm never actually concerned. Even if they wrap themselves around there, it never gets more than mid-80s right there. But the really restless ones always find a way to climb where they shouldn't be. But yeah, anyway, so that's it. That is our last cage that we have finished for now. So I hope you enjoy this video. That is it for all the cages that we have finished to this point. We still have about a dozen to make, and they're big ones. So they're going to take a while, and we will have another tour video for sure when we start getting more cages done yet. But for now, that's where this entire project stands. In about 2 years, this is what we've accomplished. So we are very proud of it. We've had a lot of fun. Of course, it's been a ton of work, but it's been a great learning experience. We've enjoyed it, and it's been very rewarding getting the snakes into their homes, watching them in there, further adjusting and trying to cater to their specific wants and needs. It's just been a great experience overall. And we hope that it'll continue with the next step of building the giant cages. So yeah, that's it for this video. I have some more that I would like to put out on various topics, as well as the final Meet Our Snakes video once our newcomers have settled in fully. But I have a couple in the works that I hope that I will get out. I'm not going to make any promises because I never seem to be able to get them out in a timely fashion. But they'll get done when they get done, and I'm very excited to share them with you. So again, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys again.